to other steps, further destabilization, such as the one we're talking about today in Ukraine. Now, I'd recall that over the few months of the crisis, the very legitimate power on 21st and 22nd of February, our colleagues called for a stopping of government, which was going on in Kiev and other parts of Ukraine against the legitimate government. Now, we didn't hear them telling President Yanukovych to draw upon all powers in his hands as the president, including the use of force, so as to ensure law and order in the country. But now, for some reason, those appeals are being made to the current people in Kiev. Russia, from the very beginning of the crisis, has only been for one thing. That is to prevent destabilization in Ukraine and resolve everything through talks. We suggested talks be conducted between Ukraine, Russia, and the EU, and Russia at the heated phase of the crisis and the political confrontation in Ukraine regarding the signing or not of the association agreement with the EU. That was our proposal, but for some reason, it wasn't acceptable for the EU or the US. Now, when there was the agreement on the 21st of February, we were for its implementation and continue to feel today that many of the provisions, in essence, are justified and that they should be followed if we hope to bring the country out of a political crisis. We assisted in the conclusion of the Geneva Agreement of 17 April. It's a simple agreement, but it does pave the way for a extrication from the crisis, and the only thing that has to be done is to implement the document. However, the most striking and irritating thing is that the requirement of the people in the east of the country are very simple. They're in a situation where there's an illegitimate government in the capital, very much representative of radical elements, and people wanted guarantees of their rights. They wanted federalization. And over a very long period of time, perhaps 2 months after the toppling of the legitimate government, no one took up weapons, at least for a month and a half at least. They were waiting for a constructive response from Kiev regarding their requirements to ensure their legitimate interests. Not one time did we hear any reasonable initiative or reaction from Kiev. Some colleagues approvingly today spoke about the declarations from Mr. Yatsenyuk, where he said, and it's striking, that on 25 May, when there would be presidential elections and the president be appointed, that there would be some sort of surveys conducted regarding decentralization. People are at barricades, but we need some sort of a survey so as to know their opinion about what they want. Now, from the discussions today, more than anything, I thought it was very concerning how colleagues spoke about those operations which are currently being carried out by the Kiev government in the east of the country. There's a sort of impression that our Western colleagues can read the minds of the government in Kiev. Maybe they've seen their plans, and so they're very calmly talking about what's going on. But of course, this isn't that surprising, because as we know, that that visit from a high official with Kiev and an American representative led to a situation where the situation further escalated to a new level of confrontation and a more forceful turn of events, a violent turn of events. And here, in this regard, it's not surprising that the U.S., as I said in my declaration, indeed did not want the OSCE to do what it was supposed to do under the Vienna Agreement. That is to bring about dialogue, organize a roundtable between representatives of different regions and the government in Kiev. Why did the U.S. not want the OSCE to do that? In fact, over the crisis, Russia several times suggested different formats for the organization of such dialogue between the government and opposition forces and regions. We saw that the government didn't want to or can't do it themselves. We suggested a constitutional assembly be convened. No, well, they said they weren't ready to organize that. When the 17 April meeting was prepared, we suggested that some representatives of the regions should come, and that the fourth parties would sit, that is at least three, the EU, the US, and Russia, and the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and we could start those talks. But that proposal was rejected. So then the OSCE had the mandate, was given the mandate, and tried to carry it out. Then they were told that they shouldn't. They shouldn't, but tanks should be brought out to Slovyansk and other cities in the east of the country. Now, about what other colleagues said, or one colleague said that Russia is refusing to implement the Geneva document of 17 April. I would repeat that Russia would never deny the implementation of any useful documents agreed upon during the crisis, nor supporting the 21 February agreement, nor would it deny the implementation of the 17 April agreement. And then if you actually listen to my statement today, all of the political components, indeed, are quotations from the 17 April document. If we're intent on a political solution to the crisis in spite of the dramatic events of the past days, then perhaps we might ask our president, the PR of Korea, to make a statement from our meeting stating that the Security Council, in line with the Geneva document of 17 April, calls for a swift halting of violence, of course, including the use of force in the east of Ukraine, and appeals for a swift implementation of the Geneva document, a comprehensive implementation of it. If you would be ready to support that, we would too. Thank you, President.